welcome to the Essex Book Festival podcast. My name is Daisy and I'm going to be speaking to some of the people behind this year's festival. My guest today is an award-winning TV producer and author who will be joining us on the 11th of June at the WI Centre in Whitefields to talk about her latest book, The 9 Lives of Annie Besant. Please welcome Clare Paterson. Hi.
Hello.
It's lovely to have you with us today. So we're excited to talk about the 9 lives of Annie Besant, but first off, let's talk about the 2 lives of you, because you have a background in television. You've commissioned and produced shows like The Great British Bake Off, and then you published your first book, Mr. Horniman's Walrus, in 2022. So tell us a little bit about yourself and then how you got into writing.
Well, my career has all been in TV. I've been a commissioner and what's called an executive producer. So I've made my own programmes and I've also commissioned other people. And it's been a kind of really weird, sublime to ridiculous kind of mix, from traffic cops to saving lives at sea, for example. And I'm working with a kind of whole range of different sorts of presenters, from Kate Humble to Griff Rhys-Jones to Mary Berry, But amongst that, there's been quite a lot of history programmes, and I've always been very curious and interested in history. And then for a long time, I was a trustee of a museum in South London called the Horniman Museum, which, if you haven't been there, should really worth the trip. It's a fantastic place. And I was very proud to be involved in it, but also surprised to find that there was very little known about the family that were responsible for it, who turned out to be completely fascinating. And I decided to write a book about it. And the iconic exhibit in the exhibition is a stuffed walrus. And this stuffed walrus came all the way from Canada in the mid-19th century. And the poor taxidermist, when it got here, he had never seen a walrus before. So he stuffed it, and as he stuffed it, he stretched out the skin, because that's kind of what you do. You fill the frame. So it is the smoothest walrus in the universe, and hence the title of the book, Mr. Horniman's Walrus. So that's how I got into writing.
Oh, that is wonderful. That's a very, very big, very... You know what? I have seen photos of this walrus online because people were just astounded by it.
And I haven't seen it yet, but he's just been rehomed, I think. He's been on holiday for a while, but they've just redone the main natural history hall. So it's definitely worth a visit.
Oh, wow. So what was the story of the Horniman family, and what did you sort of uncover in your research?
Well, there were 3 generations. There was Mr. Horniman Senior, who was a tea merchant who got rich, and then had a fling with someone unsuitable at the end of his life, which was entertaining. And then his son, Mr. Horniman Junior, if you like, is the man who set up the museum. He had a passion for collecting. Victorians did. I mean, suddenly, the world was opening up. There was transport, communications, science was changing. The microscope had been invented, and people were wanting to see the world and learn about it and teach others about it. So he started collecting like mad. And his wife ultimately said, "I'm not putting up with this. You're not having any of this stuff. I'm tripping over snakes' skins and Buddha's heads and all sorts. You have to take it out of here." So he set up the museum. So that's a fascinating story, and it sort of it epitomizes that kind of, or captures that moment in Victorian life. And his daughter, who we didn't get on with, Annie Horniman, was also extraordinary in her own way. And this came as a complete surprise to me. I had no idea about this when I set out. She was passionate about the theatre, and she built the Abbey Theatre, the National Theatre of Ireland in Dublin, for her friend W.B. Yeats. So she was a theatrical entrepreneur, and she started repertory, the first person to do repertory theatre in England. So there are a kind of cast of amazing characters. You kind of think you couldn't invent them. They're so different, and represented so many interesting things about Victorian times and culture.
Wow, wonderful. They sound like such a unique family. So another very unique character from history is Annie Besant, who your latest book is about. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. She is indeed a very fascinating character. Annie, the Nine Lives of Annie Besant, I called it, tells the story of a Victorian woman who did just about everything that a Victorian woman was not meant to do. She was only 5'2" in her socks, tiny little woman, and yet she protested, she marched, she took issue with governments, she abandoned her husband, she fought for women's rights, women's suffrage, she fought for sex education, all sorts of things which are still very relevant today. She wrote a zillion books, and ultimately she spoke truth to power. And I I just was amazed by her because I knew little about her. And this was one woman in Victorian times who scared the socks off the British government in both England and in India. And to make governments afraid across two continents is quite an achievement. So I thought she was pretty extraordinary. Um, and that there's a lot to be learned from her. She's also
Definitely.
she's one of those people who, if she saw something that needed doing, she did it. She didn't just assume that it was for other people or she didn't know anything about it. She just got on with it. So women didn't go to university. She went to university. Women weren't allowed to, women weren't in courts. They weren't recognised until, I think, 1926, the first female barrister. She represented herself in court. So, she was meant to be this image of the angel in the house we have of Victorian women. That's what she was meant to be. She was having money. I just love that. I think it just, I love that kind of rebellious spirit.
Yeah, well, she's a really, really unique character. It's an extraordinary story that she has, but it is a story that has largely gone untold before. So, how did you first hear about her, and when did you decide to write a whole book about her?
I think I first knew of her vaguely in the background of my mind from the Bryant and May, what was known as the Match Girls strike, the Match Workers strike in 1888. So I'd heard of her as this woman who is deeply involved in making that a national issue and fighting on behalf of these workers in this match factory who'd all got this terrible phossy jaw from working with chemicals and who were maltreated and worked long hours and so on. And she became their she fought on their behalf. And I kind of knew vaguely about that. So I knew that she was a radical. But I had no idea about all the other things she did. So I didn't know about the sex education and freedom of speech fights that she did in this country. And I particularly didn't know about her going to India and becoming an icon of the Indian nationalist movement. Now, I mean, how do you do that as a, by this time, elderly little old lady from England? I mean, a foreigner coming in and leading before Gandhi the nationalist movement. So I thought, well, that was extraordinary. And when I, started all the reading, I found that many people, frankly, were embarrassed about her. They liked it when she was being a reformer in this country, and that was fine. And then they stopped their stories in 1893 when she went to India. This is largely because when she went to India, she became a theosophist. And theosophy is this kind of occult religion that was established by a woman called Madame Blavatsky in the 1870s. And its believers believe in reincarnation, but they also think that there are wise men or Mahatmas or masters who live in the hills in Tibet who pass on occult knowledge to the initiated. These messages arrive on your pillow or on the mantelpiece or whatever, just sort of by magic, by this process called precipitation. And Annie became one of those who received these messages. And Madame Blavatsky died, and a little while later, she took over the whole movement. So this is just another extraordinary thing that she did, that this woman who, in England, had been known and hated as an atheist, because that was just not what you did, and she was married to a vicar, so it was definitely not what you did. She went from being an atheist to being the leader of the theosophical movement across the globe. I mean, that takes some doing. And you may not feel sympathy or understanding necessarily with theosophy. It's rather a sort of foreign idea to most people, although much less so in India. Um, but you have to admire what she did to get that. But it can look very inconsistent. It can look as though, she did this on Monday and something completely different on Tuesday. But for her, it was all a search for the truth. And she was very intellectual, very thoughtful, and she dug down into each of these different areas as she reached them, and she was passionate about them. But then as soon as they failed her, as soon as she felt they weren't working, she moved on. So she went through this, she transitioned, but for her, it wasn't just a lightness of, it wasn't frivolity, it was all extremely serious. And when she became a theosophist, she felt she'd come home. Theosophy, I don't know if you've heard of theosophy before, but it is I say, a bit foreign to many people. I was quite surprised when I told a friend a while ago that I was writing a book about Annie Besant and theosophists, and he said that his mum and his grandma had been theosophists, and he'd come home from school and his mum would be meditating or relating to the masters at her desk, and then she'd come away and say, the masters say you've just not been doing your schoolwork properly and you've got to concentrate more on doing your homework. And he said that happened to him regularly, and it was taken really seriously. So that's that's in the 1970s.
Wow. So yes, as you were talking about, Annie, she sort of went from one thing to another. So in the book, you tell her story through her 9 lives, from her Christian wife to pariah, a cult initiate to politician. So tell us, what were these 9 lives, and why did you decide to structure the book in this way?
Well, because her life was so complex, and it could have been 2 lives if I'd chosen to do that way, because it could have been England and then India. But there's much more interest in all the nitty gritty bits in between, and it all kind of adds up. And so it seemed like a very good plan for embracing all of these changes and for going on a journey through them. But it also allows you to make links between it. So, for example, she was this is the height of empire, and she believed in king and country. She was she wasn't a radical in those terms. She believed in the good that the empire could do. And then when she went to India, she was telling Indians to believe in themselves, in their own stories, and in their ancient history, a lot of which shares ideas with theosophy, this kind of ancient wisdom. And in doing that, she was essentially telling them to rise up and to be themselves and to slough off the British and our ideas. So she wasn't having it that in school you should learn the same stuff as you do here. What good was it learning about the War of the Roses to an Indian boy? So her ideas morphed. She wanted the empire to be there, but she wanted it to be good. She wanted a good empire, not a bad empire. And you see how those ideas develop over time. So, how are you going to do it? That's how I did it, and I thoroughly enjoyed researching each of those different sections, and then trying to work out how they linked to one another. And it means that you go on this journey from her, starting off in Lincolnshire, marrying an absolutely no good Reverend Frank Besant, and ending up being burnt on a funeral pyre in Chennai in India. And that's some journey.
Ah, wow, yeah, it truly is a journey. So tell me, now that you have, you've written this whole book, you've done all this research, what do you think her sort of character was like to be able to do these things. Where do you think she got all this fighting spirit from?
It's hard. It's hard to know, isn't it? I think she had it. I think she must have been born with it. She she started really young. This because this was a time when post Darwin and people are thinking differently about the world and people are questioning the literal truth of the Bible. And so when she was, I don't know, 11, 12, 13, she was reading the Bible and expecting it to be right. And then she was finding it wasn't right. So at one stage, for example, in response to that, she books herself an appointment with Pusey, who was an incredibly important um, uh, character and thinker about religious affairs. And she just got a meeting, went in there, and told him it wasn't good enough. I mean, he sent her packing, but she just kind of assumed that if you want to know something, you go and talk to the people, you find out, and you push, and then if it's wrong, you keep on pushing. So all through her life, she met actually the critical people of the day, the people who history looks much more kindly on than it does her, actually. People like George Bernard Shaw, Charles Bradlaugh, Madame Blavatsky herself, the journalist W.T. Stead. All these people were very important in their own areas, and they were all mesmerised by her. When they came into her field of vision, she had really strong relationships with all of them. And sometimes historians have gone, oh, it's just men, she was just doing what the latest man hosed into view, and she then agrees with what they said. No, it wasn't that. She's a strong character, but she didn't have a separate personal life. She engaged thoroughly, completely with everything that she was thinking. And then when she finished thinking that it wasn't good enough, on she moved.
So yeah, obviously, as you said, she's been involved with many different movements. She's involved in strikes. She's involved in sex education. She's involved in India and empire, things like that. So what would you say today is her legacy? Presumably, she has many.
Well, I think her legacy, to be honest, her biggest legacy is India. There's no doubt that she was a very, very effective campaigner. But like so much of her story, she's been effaced from it. So we now think about Gandhi in India. And most people won't have heard or think about Annie Besant in India. I don't think she was in the Gandhi film. I don't think she had a role in it at all. So, she's not there. And yet she was incredibly important. Between, I don't know, 1908 or 9 and the war, and to the end of the war, she was a critical person. And she was she was certainly among a handful of the most famous women in India. I forgot what you asked me now.
Just what her legacy is, really. Obviously, as you said, India is a very big part.
She was in this country. She was incredibly instrumental in with trade unionism, and she was made, I can't remember the title, secretary or something of the new trade union movement. She was very important in terms of industrial relations and workers' rights, and she was part of that big movement for women's suffrage. Incredibly important in that. Again, effaced by some of the other big names that were there. But when I think I can't remember the number now, 4 million women, maybe I'm exaggerating, were walking across London and ending up at many of them going to the Albert Hall. Among the speakers, the ones you'd expect to be there, was Annie. I mean, she was very much a part of all that. So she also contributed to all that kind of movement too. So her problem in terms of legacy is that she did so much. People who get a very clear legacy often did one thing. They did one thing and that's it, and then it's recognised. When she spread herself over 2 continents and so many themes, she ends up not quite surfacing as number one in any of them, even though she was pivotal. Also, she was a woman. She was a woman. What happens to women in history? No.
That's very true. So obviously, as you said, she's very influential in India. In India, is she remembered better than she is over here?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to India, you find there's Annie Besant buildings, Annie Besant roads, Annie Besant avenues. You know, her name is there. There are statues to her. She's really well respected. Probably marginally less so now because of the way nationalism, you know, develops. But she's absolutely recognised as a person who played a pivotal role in those early years, and most Indians I meet are very well aware of her. And
That
most
must be
English,
wonderful.
yes, great, but most English people are not very aware of her, and that's very strange too.
So yeah, I mean, it must be wonderful for you to meet people who are aware of her story. But it's also, you know, great. You know, you've written this book and now you're going around and telling people to make us all aware. So you're doing your bit for Annie.
There's also a bit of a link. The Annie Horniman, the third generation of the Horniman family, um, uh, was a spiritualist who became a member of the Golden Dawn, it was called, another spiritual venture. So there's this kind of religious link. It was there was so much going on in those years towards the end of the century, and I do find all that fascinating.
Yes, I mean the Victorians. There was a big time, wasn't there, of spiritualism, and a lot of you know, also very famous characters like Arthur Conan Doyle were involved
Absolutely,
in these. Yeah.
that's what I'm writing about now.
Ah, really? Tell me more.
That'll be a bit further down the line, but it's just as this one kind of out of the Horniman, you know, my and all the researches I was doing on that. So now I can't quite leave it alone. I'm really interested in going further and looking at spiritualism, Victorian spiritualism, 100 years of spiritualism. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I'm sure, again, very rich ground. And obviously spiritualism still around today. There's spiritualist churches and yeah. So yeah, interesting to see that influence. So obviously we're really excited that you are going to be joining the Essex Book Festival on the 11th of June at the WA Centre in Whitefield. What are you most looking forward to about the event?
I think, well, it's just, I mean, thank you. It's brilliant to have the opportunity to be able to talk to people about something and somebody I feel very passionate about. And hopefully I'll be able to convey some of that and other people will, you know, redress the balance a bit and put her back on a bit of a pedestal, even though it's a, you know, controversial pedestal. But I think also I'm looking forward to just talking a little bit about how I got there, some of the research, some of the archives that I went to, which are fascinating, and going to India and going to the Theosophical headquarters, for example, where there are bison in the river and peacocks running around, and it's a really extraordinary place. And Annie Besant's bedroom is still there, with this lonely little single bed, which is somehow very evocative for me. So I really hope to have the opportunity to just. I think sometimes it's interesting to talk about the process, you know, about how you get somewhere and what you went through on the way.
Yeah, it's a real journey that you've been on. I mean, how long did it take you to all in to write this, and how it must be quite a journey.
I think it's been over the last couple of years, not full time, but it did involve a trip to India and a trip to America and lots of trips within the UK as well. So yeah, it's a big old chunky thing that then has to come down to a neat book size.
Yeah, it must be difficult to with somebody like her who has led such an interesting and varied life. Were there things that you had to cut out or that you couldn't include?
Oh, I think I could have written, you know, something 10 times longer, but I was also trying to make something palatable and fun and just into take pleasure and enjoy these extraordinary changes in her life and to explore those uh, as a rattling good story and also with a main character who is extraordinarily fun. Fun, not always in a good way, but fun because she was she was determined. I mean, there's a little story about her when she was studying for when Annie Besant was studying for a university degree, which they didn't want to give her. Um, she came top in every subject. She was doing all these science things. She was doing electricity and I don't know what, everything. And in her maths, she was particularly good at, and she topped. She came top of all the students in all the other subjects. When it came to maths, she failed, and then it turned out that the professor of maths just wasn't having it. He would not have her pass the exam because her reputation was too bad. He hated the fact that she had advocated sex education for everybody, including poor people, and he hated the fact that she was an atheist, and so he was determined she wasn't going to pass the exam. I mean, it's not just extraordinary. And then another professor, no, I've got this wrong. Somebody from yes, another professor refused her permission to go walking in some Royal Botanic Gardens because they didn't want her to sully the place with her toxic quality. She really was seen as bad. And the director of Kew heard about this and generously said he would offer her tickets. But then it turned out he was only offering her tickets before it was open to the public because he was worried about her meeting people like his daughter going walking there. So you have to be tough to undertake, to face that kind of hostility because of your attitudes. And I found that fascinating. And I hope other people will find it fascinating. And whether she was in India or in Britain, she was displaying that kind of can-do attitude. And you just got to admire that.
Yeah, no, she must have really. I mean, there is a certain sort of gumption to that kind of character who faces that kind of adversity, but still doesn't back down. You know, she never went, "No, I'm actually going to do as people want."
She didn't really care what other people thought. And that's a real power if you have that. Most of us are really concerned about what other people can think of us. Annie Besant didn't worry, and that gave her real strength.
I think there's probably something that we can all learn from her.
I do.
So yeah, so it's wonderful that you'll be joining us so that you can share a bit of that with all of us. Hopefully we can be more Annie. This year at Essex Book Festival we're having you, but we're also hosting over 100 events across the county in 40 different venues. So to you, obviously, the Essex Book Festival is a bit different, isn't it? You know, we're a whole month, we go to lots of different places, we talk about lots of different things. What stands out to you about the Essex Book Festival?
I think it all sounds amazing, and thank you for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be a part of it, and I've been through and looked at what's on, and inevitably I'm going through kind of ticking stuff. So I'd love to meet Jonathan Friedland. I've always thought he was amazing, and The Escape Artist was one of my favourite books of last year. And I saw the Dorothy Sayers lecture. I'm a bit of a Dorothy Sayers fan, and I love crime fiction. And you've got Nikki French as well talking about crime fiction and so on. And I've made a lot of films about architecture, and all these interesting walks that are happening around particular buildings and so on just look amazing. And I was also interested in some of the refugee stuff. There's a novel, I've forgotten the novelist's name, but there was a novel based around Lebanon and the refugee camps there. And then I saw that Marina Warner is doing a session maybe called In Transit, teaching refugees and asylum seekers to find ways of being able to write creatively about what they've been through. And I work with, I volunteer with asylum seekers a lot, and I've done that for the last 6 years. So I was really intrigued to see that. We have Marina and another collaborator were working with them to express those kind of ideas. So, my interests are quite wide. I think I have that kind of, that's my whole career in television was spent, going through all these, becoming an expert for 6 months on one thing and then moving on to the next. So I have quite a broad range of interests. And And so has the Essex Book Festival. It seems to me to cover all bases, and I thought that was rather exciting.
This is the danger with the festival. You just go onto the website, you look at the events list, and you realise there's about 10 things you want to go to.
Yes. No. Well, I don't. So thank you for having me. It looks great.
Yeah, no, we are really excited to having you. We kind of felt that, Annie's story, that there is something a bit Essex about her, having that kind of irrepressible spirit.
Yeah. You couldn't put her down.
Mm. Yes, no, and I think that there's been a lot of characters in our history that have been like that, and it's wonderful to shine a light onto her, and very fitting as well that you're going to be at the WI Centre too, which is all
Absolutely.
about women.
Absolutely. Another, I think women sometimes, I mean, women get forgotten in history. We know that, and it, that just happens. Um, but women who speak out are also often accused of, behaving in unsuitable ways. Really, they're not expected to be like that. So sometimes I've forgotten the words. Sometimes vocabulary about women is pretty unpleasant, engendered, for talking about the way they behave. And I just think it's great to celebrate someone who, not in any unpleasant way, but absolutely full of meaning, full of passion, just went ahead and said what she thought and did it. And that's, despite how controversial she is in all sorts of other respects, that's a really good thing to celebrate.
Yes, as they say, well-behaved women rarely make history.
Exactly, exactly.
I think she was probably not very well behaved, but she definitely did make history. So,
Yes.
oh well, that's wonderful, and we are really excited to have you with us. Thank you so much for talking to me today about Annie, and we cannot wait for the event and to learn more. And I feel like, yeah, we were all going to have to dive into that book to get the full story because there is just so much you can say, and we really want to know more about her. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.